The collagen industry sells $9 billion worth of peptide powders every year. Every single one works the same way. They give your body raw material and hope it gets reassembled. But there is a plant that skips that step entirely. It tells your cells to manufacture collagen from scratch. It spreads through runners. It self-seeds in shade. And it has been growing across Asia for 3,000 years while Western medicine pretended it did not exist. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to grow it in a single container on your porch for free starting this season. Right now, millions of people are opening plastic tubs of collagen peptide powder every morning. They scoop white powder into coffee. They stir it into smoothies. They spend $30, $40, sometimes $60 a month doing this. And the entire process relies on one hope. The hope that your digestive system will break those peptides into amino acids, absorb them through your gut lining, transport them through your bloodstream, and then somehow reassemble them into fresh collagen in your skin, your joints, and your connective tissue. That is a long chain of events. And at every single link in that chain, efficiency drops. Now consider a completely different mechanism. There's a small, creeping herb that grows low to the ground in tropical and subtropical climates. Its leaves contain 4 specific compounds that do something no peptide powder can do. They do not deliver building blocks to your body, they deliver instructions. These compounds activate a signaling pathway in your skin cells that tells fibroblasts, the cells responsible for producing collagen, to start manufacturing it from the raw materials already present inside your body. The distinction matters. Peptide powders are like shipping bricks to a construction site and hoping someone builds a wall. This plant is the foreman walking onto the site and telling the crew to start building with the bricks already stacked in the yard. Clinical observations across burn units and surgical recovery wards in Southeast Asia have documented what happens when this herb is applied to damaged tissue. Wounds close faster, scar tissue forms with better structure, skin regains elasticity in areas where doctors expected permanent damage. Dermatological research in South Korea tracked women over the age of 40 who used preparations of this plant for 8 weeks. Their skin showed measurable improvements in firmness and hydration. And here's the part that no collagen peptide product can match. One of the compounds in this herb does not just trigger new collagen production, it also inhibits the specific enzymes that break down existing collagen as you age, so it builds new collagen and protects what is already there. Dual action from a single leaf. No powder on the supplement shelf does both. But collagen is only one piece of what this plant does. And the next discovery is the one that made Asian physicians write it into their medical texts 3,000 years ago. In ancient India, long before modern laboratories existed, Ayurvedic practitioners classified this herb as a Medhaya Rasayana. That term translates roughly to a substance that rejuvenates the mind. It appeared alongside turmeric and ashwagandha in foundational medical texts. Physicians prescribed it for memory, for anxiety, for skin healing, for longevity. It was considered one of the most important herbs in the entire Ayurvedic system, and its name is gotu kola. In the botanical record, it is called Centella asiatica. But across the cultures that have used it for millennia, it carries dozens of names. In Sri Lanka, families call it gotu kola, and they do not take it as a supplement. They eat it for lunch. Sri Lankan households prepare a dish called gotu kola sambol, a fresh mixture of finely chopped leaves with coconut, onion, chili, and lime juice, served with rice as part of the daily meal. This is not a health trend in Sri Lanka. This is Tuesday. This is what grandmother puts on the table without thinking twice. And Sri Lanka has one of the highest concentrations of people living past 100 in all of South Asia. Walk through a street market in Jakarta or Kuala Lumpur, and you will find vendors blending fresh gotu kola leaves into bright green juice. They sell it in plastic cups for the equivalent of 50 cents. In Malaysia, they call it pagaga. In Vietnam, it is rauma, served in salads and soups, and brewed into a cooling tea that street vendors pour over ice. In Tamil Nadu, in southern India, families know it as Valarai. In Bengal, they call it Thangkuni. In China, traditional medicine practitioners have used it under the name Ji Shui Kao for centuries, prescribing it for wound healing, mental clarity, and circulatory health. Hundreds of millions of people across tropical Asia consume this plant as routinely as Americans consume lettuce. It is not rare. It is not exotic. It is not hidden behind temple walls or locked in a shaman's cabinet. It grows along roadsides. It fills ditches. It creeps across wet ground in every village from Colombo to Hanoi. And here is an observation that helped spark modern scientific interest. According to popular Sri Lankan folklore, elephants are famous for their long lives and exceptional memories. They highly favor eating wild gotu kola. This legendary connection eventually helped point modern ethnobotanists toward researching the plant's actual chemical properties. So half the world eats this plant every day. The science confirms what traditional practitioners have known for 3,000 years. The question you should be asking is not whether it is real. The question is why you have never seen it in a pharmacy, a grocery store, or a doctor's office anywhere in the Western world. Start with the exception that proves the rule. In France, a pharmaceutical product called Madicasol has been available by prescription since the 1960s. It is made from Centella asiatica extract. French doctors prescribe it for chronic venous insufficiency, which is the medical term for poor circulation in the legs that causes swelling, varicose veins, and skin damage. In Italy, the same product sits on pharmacy shelves. Across the European Union, gotu kola-based preparations are recognized pharmaceutical products. European doctors have been writing prescriptions for this plant for over 50 years. American doctors have not. American pharmacies do not stock it. American insurance does not cover it. American consumers have, for the most part, never heard its name. Part of the explanation is linguistic. Like many plants that originated in Asia, gotu kola suffered from name fragmentation in the West. Every culture that used it had its own name. Gotu kola, Pegaga, Valarai, Thangkuni, Ji Shui Kao, Rao Ma, Brahmi, although that name created its own confusion because a completely different plant called Bacopa monieri also goes by Brahmi in certain regions. Western botany settled on Centella asiatica, but that clinical name never became a household word. There was never a unifying moment where this plant entered Western consciousness under a single recognizable name. Compare this to turmeric. One name, global recognition, grocery store aisle placement, supplement section dominance. Turmeric got the unified branding. Gotu kola got scattered across a dozen languages and none of them stuck. But the deeper explanation is economic. The 4 active compounds in gotu kola are naturally occurring triterpenes. They exist in the leaf of a plant that grows in wet ground and partial shade. They cannot be patented. No pharmaceutical company can own the molecule. No supplement brand can protect the formula. A living plant that self-seeds and spreads through runners cannot generate repeat seed purchases. A fresh leaf picked from a garden container and eaten in a salad cannot be bottled, branded, marked up, or sold on monthly subscription. There is no recurring revenue in telling someone to grow a ground cover plant on their patio. Consider the funding structure. Search any major medical database for collagen peptide studies and you will find thousands of results. Search Centella asiatica collagen studies and you will find a small fraction of that number. This is not because peptides work better. This is because peptide companies fund peptide research. Supplement manufacturers sponsor the clinical trials that validate their products. Gotu kola research receives almost no Western industry sponsorship. The studies that do exist come primarily from institutions in India, Sri Lanka, South Korea, Thailand, and China. The knowledge is there, it has been published, but it was published in journals and languages that Western medical databases historically under-indexed. The collagen peptide market alone is projected to exceed $20 billion by 2030. That figure depends on consumers continuing to believe that swallowing processed powder is the most effective way to support collagen production. A free, self-propagating plant that triggers collagen synthesis through a superior upstream mechanism and simultaneously protects existing collagen from enzymatic degradation is not a competitor to that market. It is an existential threat to it. This is not conspiracy, this is economics. Companies fund research that supports their products. They do not fund research that makes their products unnecessary. The funding flows toward patentable interventions. The research follows the funding, and the knowledge gaps persist for decades. The economics explain the silence, but the plant does not care about economics. It cares about spreading. And here is what else modern research has confirmed about what this single herb can do inside your body. Gotu kola increases production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports the growth and survival of neurons in the brain. Studies tracking elderly populations who consumed gotu kola showed improvements in working memory, attention, and mood. Ayurvedic practitioners prescribed it for cognitive decline 3,000 years before Western neuroscience identified the protein responsible for those benefits. The ancient physicians did not know the mechanism. They observed the outcome, and they were right. The herb also modulates receptors in the brain that regulate anxiety. In preliminary small-scale clinical trials, researchers observed that specific extracts of Centella asiatica helped reduce self-reported markers of anxiety and stress over a 60-day period without the immediate sedative effects typically associated with classic prescription medications. The global anti-anxiety medication market exceeds $15 billion annually. A plant that reduces anxiety without sedation or dependency, grown at home for free, is another revenue stream threatened by a single herb in a container. And then there is circulation. Remember Medicassol, the French pharmaceutical product prescribed since the 1960s. The reason it works for venous insufficiency is that the same triterpenes that stimulate collagen production in skin also stimulate collagen and elastin production in the walls of blood vessels. The vessels become stronger, they hold their shape better, blood flows more efficiently, swelling decreases. For decades, European physicians have known this and prescribed accordingly. Western supplement companies selling collagen for skin have never mentioned that the same mechanism supports vascular health, because they would have to admit that a plant does it better than their powder. Collagen production, cognitive function, anxiety relief, circulatory health, and it grows in shade in a pot with almost no effort. Here is exactly how you do it. Gotu kola is a tropical and subtropical plant that thrives as a perennial in USDA hardiness zones 9 through 11. If you live in zone 7 or 8, it can occasionally survive mild winters with heavy mulching, but it is best treated as an annual or brought indoors. But even if you live in a colder region, you can grow this plant in a container and bring it indoors when temperatures drop. The plant actually prefers conditions that most garden crops reject. It wants partial shade. It wants moist soil. It wants the spot under the porch overhang that gets morning light and afternoon shade. The corner of the yard that stays damp after rain. The place where your tomatoes would rot. That is where Gotu kola thrives. Choose a wide, shallow container. A 12-inch pot works well for starting. A half-barrel planter is even better because Gotu kola is a creeping plant that spreads horizontally rather than growing tall. It sends out runners called stolons that creep across the soil surface, rooting at every node they touch. In a wide container, it will fill the surface and eventually cascade over the edges. Use a standard potting mix and keep it consistently moist. This plant does not want to dry out between waterings. If you can keep the soil damp, the plant will take care of everything else. You can start Gotu kola from seeds, from divisions of an existing plant, or from runner cuttings. Seeds are available from herb nurseries that specialize in Ayurvedic or Asian medicinal plants. Online sourcing is straightforward. Search for Gotu kola or Centella asiatica. Be careful if a seller lists it under the name Brahmi, because the plant Bacopa monieri is also sold under that name, and it is a completely different species. Confirm the botanical name Centella asiatica before purchasing. Once established, gotu kola self-propagates with quiet aggression. The runners spread. New plants root at every node. In tropical and subtropical climates, a single planting becomes functionally permanent. The patch expands on its own year after year after year. In cooler climates, bring containers indoors before the first frost or allow the plant to die back and self-seed in protected microclimates. In zones 9 through 11, it is essentially a perennial ground cover that never stops producing. Harvest individual leaves as you need them. The plant responds to regular harvesting by producing more growth, so picking actually encourages density and productivity. Eat the leaves fresh in salads. Blend them into smoothies or green juices the way street vendors in Kuala Lumpur and Jakarta do. Chop them finely with coconut, lime, and chili to make a simple version of Sri Lankan gotu kola sambal. Dry the leaves and brew them as tea, which is how Thai and Vietnamese households have consumed them for centuries. The flavor is mild and slightly bitter with a green, herbaceous quality. It is not strong enough to overpower other ingredients, which is why it has been so easily integrated into daily meals across dozens of cultures for thousands of years. The leaves can be dried and stored in sealed containers for months. Fresh leaves keep in the refrigerator for up to a week. But in warm climates, the living plant is the storage system. You do not need to preserve what grows back every time you pick it. One container on a shaded porch produces a continuous supply of fresh leaves from spring through fall and year-round in tropical zones. That is everything you need to get started. One container, some moisture, a little patience. The plant takes care of the rest. Here is what you now know that most Western consumers do not. A creeping herb called gotu kola triggers collagen production through a mechanism that is fundamentally different from and arguably superior to every peptide powder on the market. It simultaneously protects existing collagen from the enzymatic breakdown that accelerates with age. It improves cognitive function. It reduces anxiety without sedation. It strengthens blood vessels. It has been eaten daily by hundreds of millions of people across Sri Lanka, India, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and China for thousands of years, and European doctors have prescribed pharmaceutical preparations of it for over half a century. Yet the $9 billion collagen industry has never mentioned it. The supplement aisle does not stock it next to the peptide powders. The dermatology office does not suggest growing it in a container before recommending a $60 jar of cream. The structure of Western commerce saw no profit in a plant that cannot be patented, cannot be controlled, and cannot generate repeat purchases after a single planting. What cannot be owned cannot be sold. What cannot be sold cannot be marketed. What cannot be marketed does not enter consciousness. And so 3 generations of Western consumers bought powders and capsules and creams while the answer crept quietly across wet ground in every village from Colombo to Hanoi, waiting for someone to mention it. But the plant does not wait for industries to acknowledge it. It sends out runners. It roots at every node. It self-seeds in shade and in sun and in the neglected corners of every garden that gives it moisture and time. It has done this for 3,000 years. It will do this for 3,000 more, whether the collagen industry mentions it or not.